Like, how the heck did we get here where there's such a undersupply and such a high demand? Like, I know it's a complex question, but like for you, what are the things that stand out for how we got here?
Yeah, I think this is really about political choice.
Okay.
We used to have much more intervention from the federal government in housing.
Hmm.
Um, and they, in the 90s, because of wanting to deal with debt and deficit, backed away from directly overseeing housing. So social housing was delegated or given to the provinces. And in turn, that was downloaded to some municipalities. And so that's one reason. We just had the federal leadership piece of it go. Part of it is the way that we've subsidized single family homes through grants and tax breaks. I
Hmm.
have a scholar friend from the US who says, we put a lot in the house. Like the house is not just the place we live, but it's also our retirement strategy. It's how we make sure our kids can go to schools that we
Hmm.
want them to go to. It's our
It's the vehicle for
stat.
everything, right?
It's
Yeah.
our vehicle for everything, and
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
political choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You said, sorry, you said the in the 90s, so I imagine during the Chrétien time. So
Yeah.
before that, the federal government was really actively involved in housing. Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so for about 3 decades, so of post World War II, again, another crisis time of housing, the federal government stepped up and basically built and operated social housing.
Okay.
And so there were, communities of that were created essentially that housed people. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not more sophisticated than that. There was just more money and more housing. And then obviously that's expensive to do. And so the federal government, in the Chrétien years through Paul Martin's budgets, decided to get out of the business of housing and determined that it was a provincial role and not a federal one.
Okay, so because in BC, I think you guys have BC Housing, right? Is that
Yes,
is that kind of deal with sort of provide non-market kind of housing solutions there?
that's right.
Okay, not every province has that, right? I don't
No,
think.
no. In some places, like in Ontario, for example, it's really been seen as now a municipal role.
Yeah. So okay, so the federal government kind of absolves a responsibility from that. Then what is that? What does that start to do over time in terms of just like the supply of housing, or just kind of contributing to the situation we have now?
Yeah, so it suggests that there's I mean, because many provinces assumed the same position that it wasn't the role of government to, own and operate housing for especially those who are more vulnerable. What it meant is that there needed to be a market role for this, that the market would need to step in, sometimes with subsidies, sometimes with restrictions. For example, having a certain number of units that were identified for lower income or middle class folks. But essentially, the idea was the market will be able to deal with this issue, and
Hmm.
that's where we see the gaps. They aren't. Um, there are a considerable number of individuals who just simply cannot afford market housing, and so the question is, what do we do about that? And because there isn't the supply that's being created, we now don't have enough supply to sort all of those who need housing. So that's one piece of it. The other
Hmm.
piece is our population has grown. So we have more people who are coming to Canada, which we need. We need that from a
Labor
immigration.
standpoint, or yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We also have tremendous labor needs here,
Hmm.
but we don't have the housing to provide to people. And so, I'm reticent to say that immigration, especially these days, is the cause of the housing crisis because it is not. This is a decades in the making
Hmm.
issue, but we're definitely stretched in terms of the housing supply that we have and the ability to house those who need it at the rates that they can live in.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that there is a place for like, is it too late now to for the federal government to go back and try to get into non-market housing? Is there any sort of, quote unquote wartime kind of level of effort that we could put to this problem? Or yeah, any thoughts on that? Because I've heard, recently people kind of entertaining that idea, I guess.
I think that there's absolutely and should be, this is the moment to change how we do things. It
Okay.
is. I mean,
Yeah.
we really do have a crisis of leadership in this area. Um, the only government that can really do it across the board is the federal government,
Hmm.
and they're reticent. Um, they don't have to do it by directly building and operating housing as they did post World War II. They can do it through funding. They can do it in a similar model that we've created healthcare. Healthcare is another line item that was not in our constitution that we figured out a national response to. I think we are at that level of crisis. And again, there are ways that we can ensure cooperation with principles around a right to housing or a need for housing.
Hmm.
Um, and we should, they should.
Hmm.
So yes, I think this is a fixable problem. I don't think we're too far down any road that we can't re-steer the ship.